see you guys in the dark.
I'm a single Christian woman in my 20s, and since I don't have many friends in my local church, I decided to sign up to a website where I would make friends online. Some of the site members also used it for purposes of dating, which was okay with me as I was open to the possibilities. Soon I met a guy there who seemed nice, and we had some interests that were in common. After a few months of the friendship, we began to Skype since we lived far away from each other, so that we would not have to meet in person. We began chatting, and he seemed okay, but every now and then he would pause, go quiet, and just stare into the webcam. When I told him that it was creepy and asked why he was doing it, he replied that he enjoyed sharing the silence. I wasn't sure if it was normal, since around the same time I was busy dating someone else. I avoided the guy for several months. However, when I broke up with my ex, I was feeling lonely and decided that I wouldn't mind chatting to a friend to take my mind off of things. The guy happened to be the only person available. We ended up chatting every couple of days for about 2 weeks, and I even started getting used to the uncomfortable silence and staring when things turned weirder. During our conversations, I found out that the guy was in his 30s and still a virgin, and we both agreed that we believed in sex only after marriage. So it came to me as a surprise when one day he confessed that he has a fetish for girls in school uniform and asked me if he could send me an erotic schoolgirl outfit with a very short miniskirt because he wanted to see me wearing it. I said no, since I don't like wearing revealing clothing. Another time he showed up in his bed on the webcam, only wearing his underwear, and began to ask me more dirty questions. I just laughed and made a few jokes, then tried to change the subject. However, he was not very responsive to the conversation, instead preferring to stare at his screen into the webcam, grinning while making repetitive motions with his hand under the bed cover. I didn't want to see it, so I made an excuse, and then left. I would have completely stopped chatting to him after that, but the next day, and the day after, he repeatedly texted me, wanting to go onto the webcam. Since I was bored and lonely, I asked him to promise me that he wouldn't be naked and do dirty things. He agreed to this. For a couple of days, we managed to carry on chatting, but soon after, he did it again, and this time it was much worse. First, he asked me to touch myself and send him a recording of it. I refused, explaining to him that in case my computer ever gets hacked, I do not want such things to be seen anywhere on the internet. "Oh, but you don't have to make a video. I just want to listen to the noises that you make," he replied. Again, I refused, saying that it made me uncomfortable, but he would not take no for an answer. He took off his underwear and began touching himself, as if he was stroking a pet, while grinning at me with a big, creepy smile. I told him that I had to go, and terminated the video call. That same evening, I sent him a long message explaining why I don't think that we would be compatible with each other, and said that I found him very disrespectful, and I want to stop seeing him. He responded saying that I'm stuck in the past, only thinking about my ex who used me, even though the guy had no idea what went on between me and my ex. At that time I got angry, and told him not to speak to me again about it. So I really hope that this pervy guy does not try to contact me ever again. Okay, look. We all have our bad date stories. We all have had bad experiences that to us are the worst dates in history. But I'm a realist, and I'm aware that my stories probably pale in comparison to a lot of others out there. And thankfully, my crazy dating woes are probably funny in hindsight. But I couldn't resist sharing this one, because while I can now laugh my ass off at what has happened, at the time this occurred, I probably thought this was the worst moment of my life. Looking back, it was probably the most laughable moment of my life. I met a guy named Dave on Match. He and I were both rather busy with careers, so the fact that we talked maybe once or twice a week was fine for both of us. As time passed, things progressed, and we got to know each other pretty well. Needless to say, I was more and more comfortable with him each time we got on the phone or chatted on Skype. Since we Skyped about 50% of the time, this gave me a great chance to actually see him interact with me, and I must say, he was easy on the eyes to boot. After about 2 months had gone by, we finally got our schedules to sync up, so we could meet without interruptions. Dave lived about 1 block from a pretty cool hotspot in town, so we thought that it would be a good idea to stick close to home, since I lived only a mile from him as well. Dave suggested that I meet him at his place so that we could get acquainted, sit by the pool in his apartment complex, and just chit-chat for a little bit before heading out. I thought that this was a good idea because, honestly, he was very polite, easygoing, and very low pressure. He didn't give any indication that I had anything to fear or worry about, and after the 2 months of talking, I didn't have any problems meeting with him at his place, especially since we were going out at the pool and did not really spend time inside his place. I was cool with that. My only slight red flag was that after time, the conversation didn't really get kinky. But he was starting to throw around the sexual innuendos on occasion and made hints towards things that he liked sexually. Okay, that's no big deal. I get it. He's a guy, and I have to admit, I'm no prude. So while I didn't allow the conversation to get too crazy, I played along, but casually. I guess my playing along gave Dave the wrong impression, and here's why. I arrived at Dave's place for our date, got to his door, and was pretty excited to finally meet him. Well, I knocked, and it took him about 30 or 40 seconds to answer the door, which is actually quite a long time since his apartment really wasn't that big. To my amazement, Dave was completely naked, but, well, for the lack of better terms, was pleasuring himself as he answered the door. And I don't mean that he was just starting to do it either. He was actually very close to finishing. Again, for the lack of better term, he finished about 3 seconds after opening the door, right in front of me. He let out this grunt that could be heard a block away, and that's not all he let out. I have heard stories that come close to this one, but never this explicit. I think my jaw fell halfway to the floor. I was stunned, amazed, and slightly frightened. All I could say was, "Are you kidding?" I think I was 2 steps towards the door when I uttered those words, and I actually didn't hear Dave say another word. I just heard his door close. I got in my car and bolted from the scene. He texted me about 10 minutes later, telling me he had been so turned on by our conversations that he was beyond excited and aroused by me that he just couldn't help himself. He also mentioned that he thought that I would enjoy what I saw. Needless to say, while this was something that I wouldn't mind watching or seeing after I know someone much better, it was totally inappropriate at the time. I let him know that and asked him never to contact me again. Thankfully, he didn't. From now on, I think I'll stick to meeting in public for the first date. Well, I thought by using a more popular and expensive dating site, the one that we all see on TV, I'd get a better class of person, someone looking for a relationship versus just a hookup. I was wrong. I met Keith right before Christmas, and he broke his leg a month later. I, of course, helped take care of him and spend a lot of time with him. Had a nagging feeling that we weren't right for each other. He was a little clingy and seemed a little off. I had a huge St. Patrick's Day party at my home with about 50 friends, and he came along. Since he was finally off the crutches, he was meeting most of my friends and family for the very first time. He got so drunk that I had to put him to bed by 9 o'clock. I checked on him several times. The first time he was puking on the floor without a bowl. The second time I could smell poo in my room. I had left quickly. And the third time he was passed out naked across my bed, and I had to cover him with a sheet, just in case someone went in there for some reason. He woke up at 2:30, woke me up from the couch, and wanted me to go into my room and sleep with him. Gross. I said no nicely, and said that we'd talk in the AM. He kept me awake until about 5:30, just bothering me, crying and trying to manipulate me into coming into my bedroom. At around 8:30, I woke up and had to physically threaten him to get him to leave. He then proceeded to call me 70 times a day, 15 voicemails, 20-something text messages. I ended up blocking him from my Facebook and my cell phone. Took me a week to completely clean my room between the puke and the poo that was on the rugs, walls, and bed clothing. He then started to email me at home and at work. I then found his shitty boxers and a towel of mine hidden away in a room 2 weeks later. It's almost been 2 months, and he's still reaching out to me. I had to be horribly mean in an email, report him to the dating site, and report him to the local PD, because you never know. I think that I'm pretty awesome, but not this awesome. Hopefully this is the last time that I have heard from him. To top it off, this is a 40-year-old man. I met a guy online from my church. He seemed to already know me, knew my name and all. So I figured that he must have been in a class that I was in, or something. Anyways, he was nice, clean-cut, well-dressed, good manners. He talked to me on Facebook, always went out of his way to talk to me at church, and so on. After this had been going on for several months, he sits down and starts telling me about this girl who caught his eye, and how he went out with her, blah blah blah. Then he gets out his phone and starts texting her. I was hurt, of course, especially by the implication that I was far from eye-catching. Anyways, I pretty much stopped talking to him, but he continued to talk to me. I would be polite, but that was about it. After taking the girl out on a second date, he stopped seeing her. I thought after a few months when I'd gotten over it, well, maybe I was just sending mixed signals, seeing as how he was still making it a point to talk to me. It was being really nice and so forth. So I asked him out for coffee through Facebook. He said yes, and we met up. He was polite, paid for his own coffee. I paid for mine. He held the door open and pulled my chair out for me. Then he starts telling me about the girl that he dated a month or so earlier. A completely different girl from the one that caught his eye, and how he's going to be bringing her to church. They started going out again a week later. They broke up since then. I think that he's dating another girl, but I haven't seen her in a while, so who really knows? Before these 3 girls, he told me that he hadn't been on a date in 2 years. So being stupid, I put a happy birthday on his Facebook a week later when it was his birthday. He went and said thank you to every single person who wished him a happy birthday, but ignored mine as if it wasn't even there. I figured I have plenty of friends on Facebook who actually want me on there, so I just unfriended him and left it alone. After that, I only said hi in response, and otherwise ignored him. A week or so ago, he ran up to me after church, and asking me about things that I'd told him months and months earlier. I answered him, and then left. He has said a hi a few times since then, but I pretty much ignore him. In the end, I figured that it was his loss, and from now on, I'll pay closer attention. I guess he was trying to keep me around as a backup plan. I really have no idea. The conversation is going well, all right. She asks me where I'm from. I tell her that I'm from a city near there that has a rough reputation. She lights up when I say this and asks if I was in a gang and how many fights I got into. I laughed and said that I wasn't in any gangs and that I hate fighting. I did tell her that I got into a fight after leaving a bar a year prior, and I would never want to do that ever again, even though the fight was super lame. I ended up with a black eye after the tussle. I work in a fairly conservative engineering office, so I did find it funny when I told people that I got my black eye in a fight when they asked me. My date had giggled at that, then said she always wanted to get into a fight, but would hate to get hit in the eye. I told her getting hit in the eye is better than getting hit in the mouth, because that shit hurts, and it bleeds even if the punch wasn't that good. She said that she didn't believe me on this. I said that I had older brothers and preferred getting punched in most places other than my mouth. My date still didn't believe me. She then said that I want to find out, and proceeded to punch herself in the face repeatedly to see which area would hurt the most, in the middle of the restaurant. This was on our first date. I asked her to politely stop, but she continued to do so. She did end up agreeing with me eventually. We hugged and went our separate ways, never speaking to each other ever again.
If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe, like, and hit the bell for notifications on future videos, and become a stalker of the night. And I'll see you next time.